You listen to part one of our conversation with Becky Reed, COO of BankSocial. In this episode, we dive into Becky's journey through the credit union service organization model, the power of cooperation in the credit union space, and how legacy and fintech-driven CUSOs are shaping the future. Let's get started. Welcome to 22 Minutes in Lending. I'm your host, Vince Passione. Today, we're joined by Becky Reed. Becky's been a CEO, CUSO founder, board chair, and now COO at BankSocial, where she champions blockchain, digital assets, and collaborative innovation. In this episode of 22 Minutes in Lending, we'll explore how Becky and BankSocial are helping to shape both the future of credit unions and the DeFi movement. Becky, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, Becky, we're talking before the call. Obviously, we met a few times, and the last time we met, you were the chair in the CUSO, and I know you're still on the CUSO board. So
Yep.
you've been involved in CUSOs your entire career. I got to hear you talk about it, and you have a tremendous passion for it. So help me understand your view of the CUSO model and why you're so committed to its success.
What I love about this industry is our collaborative nature. Because we're not-for-profit financial institutions, we compete, but we don't compete, right? So we started out initially with seg groups, and even if the credit union across the street was there, they probably weren't competing in a field of membership perspective. And so move forward now today, many credit unions are community financial institutions, but still we cooperate. We don't necessarily compete. There's plenty to go around. And so I say all the time that cooperation is our superpower in the credit union industry because it really sets us apart from other financial institutions. We are community-owned financial institutions. We're not just community-based financial institutions. And so
Correct.
people own the credit union. Well, CUSOs have to serve credit unions. So you become a CUSO by getting an investment from a credit union. If you get an investment from a credit union as a fintech or any other type of business, whether you're 100% owned by credit union or credit unions, or you have $1 of investment from a credit union, if you receive member money, if you receive cooperative ownership money, you become a credit union service organization. And a requirement of a credit union service organization is you have to serve other credit unions. So that's the superhero in the equation. There is no other industry like that. Banks can own a bank-owned company that doesn't necessarily have to serve other banks. They can serve a completely different industry if they need to. And so credit unions have that special sauce, I'm going to say, that is really the collaborative movement in action.
And when you look back, if you look at CUSOs and their growth, right? I mean, the NCAA used to publish their growth path. Last time we saw it, I think it moved from about 900 to 1,000. Is that too big? Is that too small? Is that just right? Like, how do you judge? And when I was at the CUSO, the other thing I noticed going around the show is that there seems to be a lot of overlap. Like, you could have multiples in an area. You could have like 5 CUSOs that are doing member business lending. Does that matter to the CUSO at all? Should there be a governor on it to avoid overlap?
Well, again, we are cooperative. We're not necessarily competitive, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have choices,
Mhm.
right? If we
Right.
believe that there shouldn't be choices, then there should just be one massive credit union and everybody should just belong to that one. But there is differentiation and specialization that happens when you have individual credit unions, and it's no different from a CUSO. So you might have one CUSO that specializes in a loan origination system around, auto loans, that's its specialty, that's its niche, or maybe it's
Right.
focused on the small credit union market. Maybe you have another one that's focused more on real estate lending or enterprise commercial lending or something like that. So I don't see it as a problem that the number of CUSOs has grown. I actually think that is a sign of health in the industry. So you don't have a market if there's no competition. And if there's only one that's offering it, then you're not going to be getting the best price. CUSOs are for profit, just like any other fintech is. And while they serve not-for-profit financial cooperatives, their model is still profit. And the investors, the credit unions who invest in them, are going to expect something in return. So they need to make money. So there's I'm going to call it collaborative cooperation that is
Yeah.
co-opetition maybe.
Yep. Yeah. Now, what's your advice to? So I've been around the credit union industry as a partner for over probably 22 years, and looked at the CUSO model, and obviously been very familiar. There's some CUSOs that have been out there a very long time. When I think about Cuddle, right, and Origins, do you think that the older CUSOs are at a disadvantage to the newer ones that are being founded by fintechs because they don't get the same type of capital infusion? Or
No,
okay,
no. I think that there are, to me anyway, and I say this often, there's kind of the legacy CUSO model, and I don't mean legacy in a bad
right,
way. I
right.
mean, they've been around for a long time. They're kind of that traditional CUSO
Mhm.
model. And the traditional CUSO models are like the Origins, which was formerly Cuddle, right? So most of the CUSOs that were formed initially, I say this all the time, necessity is the mother of invention. And
Hmm.
so credit union said, I want to do this and I can't because of that. And so that created a CUSO. So a lot of CUSOs were created in the early days around things that credit unions either couldn't do themselves or couldn't do at scale. So things like mortgage lending, things like commercial lending, things like being a financial advisor or having a brokerage. And most of those traditional models were really to serve one credit union or to serve a very close knit, maybe geographical group of credit unions. So that's kind of the traditional model. Now they've been around long enough. They are profitable. They are doing well. They wouldn't be around if they weren't. So they have scale, right? So they have, in some cases, hundreds of customers and hundreds of credit unions that have a great reputation, again, or they wouldn't be here. And
Right.
so they're not out there looking for capital. And if they were, they could get it from a million different sources. It's not hard as a established business to go raise capital if you need to, if you have a plan for what you want to do with it. I think that the contemporary CUSO model is more not being designed from the ground up to fulfill a particular need. So a lot of those traditional CUSOs were formed specifically by credit unions to do something.
Yeah, that's a
Fintechs
problem.
that, yes, fintechs that were coming, that are now coming into the space are looking for credit unions to provide them the capital in order to grow and serve the industry at large. And so that's a little bit of a different model. And certainly fintechs, it's more exciting. It kind of feels more like Shark, Tank kind of a thing. It feels a little more sexy than, a mortgage lending CUSO. But I wouldn't say that just because they're the shiny object, at the dinner table right now, as opposed to kind of the boring looking plate, that they might be getting a lot of attention. But I wouldn't say that they get most of the capital or some sort of advantage over the bigger ones in the space. Not at all.
Oh, helpful. All right, let's switch gears, right? Let's talk about the next chapter. So,
Okay.
BankSocial. And when I look it up, and I've heard you talk about it as a decentralized autonomous organization. Okay, unpack that. What does that mean?
All right, so what you're describing is a DAO. A decentralized autonomous organization is basically a company that runs itself. Okay, it's autonomous. Well, when you think about a company that's running itself, it wouldn't have been possible without this blockchain technology thing, right? So blockchain technology is something that is a digitally native environment, and you can do all kinds of things on a blockchain just using code. And so it
Hmm.
creates efficiencies and dynamic capabilities that just were not capable before, prior to blockchain technology. So all a decentralized autonomous organization is an organization that runs autonomously, utilizing code, smart contracts, and things like that for a governance perspective. So BankSocial itself, we're a C corp. BankSocial itself is not a DAO. There is a DAO called BankSocial that has a governance mechanism that is managed by token holders. So there are BankSocial token holders out there, which is a separate company. It's a Wyoming LLC DAO. That company is governed by token holders. So when they have governance models and the members or the token holders, this is why I think it looks a lot like a digital credit union. The members, the token holders, vote for the governance of the organization. So people can actually put ideas out there and say, hey, I want the company to do X, Y, or Z, and it goes out for a vote. And the token holders vote on that. So very similar to members voting for a board of directors.
And that was the original when it was formed. It was formed this way. Did the DAO was the DAO formed first, or was Bank
Yes.
Social the C corp formed first?
Nope, the DAO was first. The DAO LLC, John Wingate founded the DAO LLC in 2021. But again, the DAO is owned by the token holders, very similar to the members. John does not own it. John does not run it. John is a token holder and a member, just like everybody else. There is a governing body that is elected by the members, sort of like a council. They're called delegates, and they assist in executing the decisions that the token holders vote on. And so, yeah, it's kind of it's a really cool concept. And I believe that credit unions will look more like that in the future.
So that takes me to the next question. So why is that so important, and what problems does it solve?
Well, credit unions are community owned financial institutions. We
Right?
talked about this before, right? They're owned by the people. And that's what makes them unique. And unfortunately, I think that that message has gotten lost over the last 2 or 3 decades. And people forget that as a member of a credit union, you actually do own the credit union and you do have a vote
Right.
in governing that financial institution. Well, credit unions are living in an analog world, right? So a lot of the voting mechanisms and the governance model, it goes through a sort of a manual vote, right? That votes for a board of directors, and the board of the directors hires the CEO and runs the credit union through that particular executive. Well, the technology is available now to get kind of circumvent or replace that analog model with a digital model that really allows for more inclusivity, allows more people to be involved and have a voice. And the members can actually vote on more things instead of just voting for a board of directors and kind of having no insight necessarily other than looking at the financials, what the board of directors is doing. Now you can have a digital model where all of the members will be able to have more transparency, more insight into what's happening into the organization, and more say. So I believe it's important for financial inclusion. And I think that the younger generations in particular are very interested in community benefits and helping their fellow man. And you can do that much, much easier in a digital way than you can in an analog.
Excellent. Excellent. So now let's segue into some products, but I think I need you to give me some of the backdrop for our listeners. So, Bitcoin, stablecoin, blockchain. You've done a great job as I've done research and listening to you speak in the past about, here, let's talk about some of the distinctions, right? And I think you were a CIO once, right?
I
So
was.
you've got technology background. So do I. I was a computer science major as well. I always tell people when the blockchain came out, I said it's a distributed ledger, but it's just dual link lists with a write-ahead log, which usually impresses people, but you had to take CS 360, which was our architecture class, to get that right. But anyway, I digress. So some of the jargon: Bitcoin, stablecoin, blockchain.
Yeah. Well, a blockchain is a type of distributed ledger. So a distributed ledger is a generic term. Blockchain is a specific term. Blockchain is most notably connected with Bitcoin. Bitcoin actually works on a blockchain, but all distributed ledger technologies are exactly what it sounds like, a ledger, which is a database. So from a technology perspective, it's just a database. It stores information. A blockchain happens to store information in a chain of blocks. That's why it's called a blockchain.
Blockchain.
Now, what's fascinating about the technology is I spoke earlier about it being digitally native. It lives 100% in a digital world. There is nothing analog about anything on a distributed ledger network, and it requires the internet in order to function. So that's a big piece of it. So the Web3 world, as we're moving from Web2, which we're in now, into Web3, requires this technology in order to function in a higher order, which we're all moving to a more digitally native world anyway. AI certainly requires it. So Bitcoin or any other token that rides on a distributed ledger is the transaction mechanism, right? That's how things move on the blockchain. And it could be a cryptocurrency, it could be a NFT, it could be a any other type of token that represents something. It can also be wrapped into a smart contract. I talked about earlier with the DAO, right, where you can program things into the code. I've heard people talk about cryptocurrency as programmable money. And certainly there are aspects of it that can be like that, especially as it relates to stablecoin. But in 2009, blockchain was invented, Bitcoin was created by Satoshi, and kind of the rest is history. But what's interesting is if you're a technology person, and anybody is that holds a smartphone, right? We're all
Right.
using technology all the time, and it moves very, very quickly, very, very quickly. I don't think any of us have a 10-year-old phone. Maybe somebody's mom has a 10-year-old phone, a flip phone or something, maybe. But I mean, even my mom in her 80s has a smartphone. So,
Yep.
so most of us aren't using 10-year-old technology, but Bitcoin is 15 years old.
No,
So,
it is fascinating when you think about what's happened, right? And but the confusion that exists, right, between Bitcoin, blockchain as just a structure, right? Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency, and now, we're seeing a lot of focus, right, especially with this administration, with the Genius Act on stablecoin. So
yep.
stablecoin, let's talk about that because that's a big part of your strategy, right? Moving to payments.
Absolutely. I initially, when I learned about blockchain and Bitcoin, I immediately saw the parallels and the disruptive capacity of Bitcoin for payments, for traditional payments. So, coming from a financial institution, I understood firsthand how painful and expensive payments are. And to your point, you mentioned earlier, payments are a integral part to what we do as financial institutions. In fact, I would say that everything can be derived back to a payment of some kind. Even a loan is a payment, right? They're getting a loan, they're paying somebody else with that money, whether it's to buy a car or a house or use their credit card. So we move money. That's what we do as financial institutions. And well, guess what? Stable coins are a US dollar backed or a stable value that is riding on a blockchain or distributed ledger. And so I immediately was like, oh my gosh, this is going to make all the difference in the world for payments, especially because a transaction with a digital wallet is how you hold your digital assets. A digital asset can be all of those things that ride on a blockchain, can be cryptocurrency, NFTs, whatever. You hold those in your digital wallet. And I can transfer any cryptocurrency, whether it's a stable coin or another type of cryptocurrency, to you, Vince, instantaneously, 24/7, 365 without a financial institution intermediary. And it is infinitely less expensive to do that transaction than any other payment rail that is around today. And so, because of that capability, even from a P2P perspective, imagine what that means for a business that is, moving millions or trillions of dollars even at a time. They're buying inventory. Think about how much money Walmart moves and how much it could save them if they didn't have to do a wire or they didn't have to send, 25 ACHs. It's infinitely cheaper. And so I immediately saw that from a payments perspective. And that's what it is. Stablecoin is a new payment rail. DLT is a new payment rail. Now, certainly there are lots of other aspects to DLT, but to me, the fundamental game changer for financial institutions right now, today, is stablecoins.
That's the end of part one of our conversation with Becky Reed. In part 2, we'll shift gears to the future of lending, from smart contracts and tokenized loan portfolios to the role of decentralized autonomous organizations and stablecoins in reshaping financial services. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you next time for another 22 Minutes in Lending.
Thank you for listening to the 22 Minutes in Lending podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. You'll find links to any resources mentioned in the show notes. If you're enjoying our show, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review.